Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video, I decided to compare some modern NBA players to some historic ones. Now, some things to keep in mind really quickly before we get started is that obviously none of these are going to be perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect one-to-one player comparison because every single player is unique, and no matter how similar their play styles or their statistics might seem to another player, obviously it's not going to be perfect. So keep that in mind, and I understand that people are going to disagree with me on some of these, and that's completely fine, but I'd also like to see some of your guys' own comparisons down in the comment section below. One last thing, if I am comparing these two players, I'm talking about the number of seasons that the current player has been in the league. So for example, if a player has been in the league for 8 seasons, I'm comparing those 8 seasons to the first 8 seasons of the other player that I'm comparing them to. But with all that said and all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. First up, I'm comparing 2 point guards. I'll put the stats up on screen and give you guys a chance to maybe guess and see if you can figure out who I'm comparing. And the players are Chauncey Billups and Kyle Lowry. The first player comparison in the video is a relatively tame one compared to some of the ones that are going to be coming later on, but there are a lot of parallels between the careers of Chauncey Billups and Kyle Lowry. Both of them struggled to find their place in the league early in their careers. Lowry went from Memphis to Houston before finding his way in Toronto, and then Billups went through a really tough first 5 seasons of his career after being drafted 3rd overall by the Celtics. He was traded in his rookie year, moved around to a whole bunch of teams, and never really found his place in the league until he signed with the Pistons 5 or 6 seasons into his career. In terms of similarities of their game, both of them are good two-way point guards that never really had a high enough usage rate to put up huge point or assist totals, but nonetheless were really good players that helped their teams win a lot of games. And in addition to that, they shot around the same amount of threes despite being in different eras, and shot right around the same percentage-wise from that area as well. The big difference here is that Billups had a reputation, especially in his time in Detroit, for being a great playoff player, a great postseason player, and hitting big shots and timely shots. And Lowry struggled with a lot of his postseason success, or a lack of postseason success, for a good amount of his career, and that was something he was known for. So a big difference there, but despite that, a lot of similarities between the careers of Kyle Lowry and Chauncey Billups. Next up now is another point guard comparison, and the modern day version began playing in the league in 2013, while the historic version came into the league in 2002. Once again, I'll put the stats up and see if you guys can guess. And the players are Damian Lillard and Gilbert Arenas. Seeing as how this one was in the thumbnail, it was probably a little bit easier to figure out, but there are a lot of similarities between the careers of Damian Lillard to this point and the first couple of seasons of Gilbert Arenas' career, and it's not just the fact that they both wore number 0, but it's also their statistics. They both put up around 23 and 6 with 18 shots per game and around 37 minutes per game, and even though Dame did shoot more threes on average, you can also kind of compare eras, and obviously people shoot a lot more threes now, and their shooting percentages are also very similar. They're both score-first point guards that certainly can play make for others, but never had huge assist totals relative to some of the other point guards around the league, but they also played with extreme confidence and were willing and able to take and make big shots from really anywhere on the floor. But the big difference here is that Arenas got to the free throw line more, and then from a team success standpoint, Lillard has certainly had a better career with 3 different 50-plus win seasons while with the Trailblazers, as well as a conference finals appearance. Next up is another point guard comparison, which is the last one of the video, I promise. The modern day version came in the league in 2009, while the historic version came in 1997. Once again, here are the stats. Try and take a guess. And the players are Russell Westbrook and Stephon Marbury. Okay, I know that this is going to be a tough one for a lot of people, and I know that I'm probably going to get some hate for this. It literally says in my notes that I'm probably going to get destroyed for this comparison, but I'm going to stand by it. And statistically, there's a lot of differences between these two players, more so than any of the other comparisons I've done so far in this video, because Russ has higher stats in every single category, essentially, including turnovers and shot attempts. But there are certainly some similarities in their play styles as well. Both are point guards, but are probably more so shooting guards in terms of their play style. Even though they can play make as their respective assist numbers show, they've both always been more score-first attacking guards more than point guards. Not only that, but in terms of their field goal attempts to their shooting efficiency, they are very similar as well. Both of them shoot a lot of shots and aren't very efficient, and most specifically, their three-point numbers are very, very low in percentage-wise, but they still, for some reason, decide to take a lot of threes. Now, some big differences here. Obviously, Marbury played on a ton of different teams, while Westbrook has only recently been moved to the Houston Rockets, to a team that was not the one that drafted him. And then obviously, Russ does have higher stats, as I mentioned earlier, including all the triple-double stuff. If you really want to get into that and be excited about the triple-doubles and the super high rebound numbers for Westbrook, that would be a big difference between him and Marbury as well. But basically where I'm going with this is that Russ is a rich man's version of Stephon Marbury and a better athlete, and even though I know that this particular comparison is going to get a lot of hate, I think it's interesting and I'm going to stand by it. First up now is the first big man comparison of the video. The modern day version came into the league in 2014, while the historic one came in 1997. I'll give you guys a chance to guess. And the players are Rudy Gobert and Marcus Camby. Okay, I'll admit that this one was pretty tough because for some reason it was a lot more difficult to find comparisons for big guys rather than guards, but eventually I did settle on the Gobert-Camby comparison. Now, in all honesty, there are probably a couple of other big guys that you could pick to put here in place of Camby to compare to Gobert, but his career has just taken such an interesting path from really not having much of a role initially to being a really big part of the Jazz over the last couple of years as a late first-round pick, and is now one of the, if not the best, big guys in the league at still such a relatively young age, not that many seasons into his career. So finding a comparison for that was difficult. I tried players like maybe Tyson Chandler, but he didn't really get his career started as quickly as Gobert has, even because he came into the league straight out of high school. It was tough to find this one because, again, big guys to guards, it's a little bit more difficult to compare bigs than it is guards apparently in this, but Camby was the closest one that I could find. Both these guys play great defense, are outstanding rim protectors, and are one of the leading shot blockers in the league in each of the seasons that they played. And they both played right around 30 minutes per game and were respectable, but not great free throw shooters. So in terms of their game, specifically on the defensive end and the impact they make on that end of the floor, they're obviously very similar, in addition to just being huge players in terms of their height. But the big difference here obviously is offense. Camby was a much less efficient player, also shot more shots per game, including some threes, while Gobert is an over 60% typical modern day big man, very high efficiency player. So that's obviously a huge difference between these two guys. But when you look at their similarities defensively and the impact that they make or made on that end of the floor, I think this is a good comparison. And last up now are two shooting guards. The modern day version came into the league in 2012, while the historic version came into the league in 1988. I'll give you guys a chance to guess. And the players are Klay Thompson and Reggie Miller. Okay, I'll admit that this one took me a while. I put a lot of time into trying to find a really good comparison for Klay Thompson, and I went back to guys like Rip Hamilton because I wanted to find really good two-way players that were good offensive players, but also really good defensive players as shooting guards. But the problem with Hamilton was he didn't shoot enough threes, so eventually ended up with Reggie Miller. And I decided to go with him because statistically they're very similar, even if their roles weren't necessarily the same. They both averaged right around 19.5 points per game in this point in their careers at also about 34 minutes a game. And even though Klay does take more shots at a lower percentage, he's a better three-point shooter in terms of both volume and efficiency. And the big difference here to me is simply the era that they're playing in. If Reggie Miller had played in the modern NBA, he would have taken out a lot of the mid-range stuff that he put up back in the day and shot a lot more threes, and his statistics might have even been better than Klay's from a point per game standpoint, but their three-point stuff would have lined up a little bit more. Reggie also got to the free throw line a little bit more, so statistically there are certainly some differences, but there's also a lot of similarities in their games as well. And that's one of the things that can definitely make finding comparisons or comparing players, whether it be in like your top 25 players of all time rankings, or just finding two players that were similar to compare to each other, comparing them across eras can obviously be very difficult, and that was most obvious in this comparison between Miller and Klay Thompson, because in all reality they are actually pretty similar. Their roles might have been different, but as players they're pretty similar. Just statistically there are some pretty major differences because of the eras they played in. And last up now, really quickly at the end of the video, I want to give you guys a chance, those of you that made it to the end of the video, to give me some player comparisons of your own, specifically for one player. I'd like to see some player comparisons that you guys have come up with for Anthony Davis. And if you get to this point in the video, be sure to leave a comment down below who you think the best historical player comparison for Anthony Davis is. Try and give some reasonings. If not, I'll try and work them out myself, and I will pick the best one, the one that I think is the best, and put it in a future video. I'm planning on doing more of these, hopefully, if this video does well. So if you guys can come up with your own player comparison for Anthony Davis, then I will do my best to put it in a future video. But there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, comparing some modern NBA players to some historic ones. If you'd like to see more videos just like this, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Once again, my name is Tucker. I thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.